Hello and welcome to the program Woke Up. And on today's program, we have a wonderful young woman who has had a pretty experienced life and has experienced many different things. She was raised Roman Catholic, but then as a teenager, she was sucked into today's critical social justice movement, had her ideology transformed, and she got heavily into feminism. She was part of the woke mob. She was an anarchist. And then the process over the next 10 to 15 years, she's going to be sharing about what really goes on in the inside of today's critical social justice movement. And we want to welcome to the show Amy Mastrine. She is the co-host with her twin sister, Julie, of the Mystic Sisters. And Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
Well, why don't we get right into it? Well, why don't you tell us about yourself and where you came from and what the cult and the ideology of critical social justice really is like from an inside view and how you got sucked into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I was raised Roman Catholic, and my experience of it was just that it was very distant, and I didn't feel God's presence there. And I think this made me vulnerable to what happened next. So, as I'm being raised Catholic, I have some questions about God that aren't being answered by my Sunday school teachers. I started to view it as kind of anti-intellectual. Didn't I would have questions about like the dinosaurs and abortion, and I didn't really get answers that felt satisfactory to me at a young age. So there was this big disconnect between the church and me and my peers. And a lot of us decided to become atheists because we just thought it was corny. Just felt really dissatisfied with how we were being taught. Um, so around this time, also, people my age were getting internet connections in their home, and message boards were becoming uh, more of a thing. And I really liked movies and film and celebrity gossip, so I would log on to message boards. And in the comments, I think I was reading a lot of content that women and gay men were writing from universities. So I was probably about 14 at the time, and they were probably in their late teens or early 20s. And a lot of the commentary had this feminist bent to it. And I, thought it made a lot of sense. I think I was young and kind of looking around and was a little dissatisfied with like the men around me. I certainly wasn't feeling, and no one was telling me like men are supposed to take care of you. And I just found them not very respectable. And, all around me was just this messaging that you have to take care of yourself and the next step is college. And, then we're all discussing that there isn't a God. So, yeah, from a very young age, just wasn't being, I think, communicated with well about truth or principles.
With the home you grew up in, I saw something that you wrote that you speak well of your father and your uncles. It seemed like you had a relatively healthy home and good relationships in terms of uh, male influence in your life.
Yes. And I think as a young woman, I just didn't appreciate it at the time, but it was absolutely there. So when I tell people my story, I think maybe they get a bit of an like extreme picture in their head, but I always had like this foundation in me. So while I was like exploring these radical movements, a part of me also had like a distaste for them the whole time. So, and I think that has to do with my upbringing and that I had a big Italian family, uncles, grandfather. My dad treated me very well. So I did have some bulwarks against this. And I think that's why ultimately I was able to come out of it and rest back at home. So, yeah, but I think when you're a young woman, you're really socialized by your peers. You just don't respect authority. At least I didn't at that age. And you want to fit in, and you're really driven by what your peers are doing. So I think that was what was socializing me more than like my family and my community. It was like young girlfriends, the media, and a curiosity, right? I just wanted to know like what was out there, what's the truth. So I entertained some of these ideas. Like maybe my parents are wrong was an inquiry that I had, and I wanted to go find out for myself.
So then right after high school, you went off to university, or was that
Yep. Yeah, I actually went to university a bit earlier than most people. I went the summer that I was 16, 17. And there, I think a lot of the ideas I was picking up online were reinforced by professors, because most of the professors at universities are very liberal. So I would take, I was interested in marketing, sociology, and just like human patterns of behavior. And those fields are almost entirely taught by liberals. I remember my professors were from Berkeley, and we all know what kinds of ideas are shared at Berkeley. So yeah, college just didn't help me at all. I was very ill at college. It's kind of funny because as I was exploring these, well, it's not funny, but as I was exploring these ideas, my body was very like symptomatic. I had like symptoms of anxiety and depression, and I wasn't connecting that the way I was thinking and the ideas I was following and my lack of God was causing these symptoms. Like I just wouldn't make the connection. So yeah, college. I went to college, and college, I was very progressive, and I was involved with a lot of radical anarchists and queer people. And a lot of students who hated white people, which now I see the irony, like my family is white. They had a lot of radical language, and we would do like demonstrations at the student center about like rape culture. And I remember my professor one time said in a lecture, he was a little more of a balanced person. He said, "I don't see any evidence that a rape culture exists." And I went and told my activist friends, and they actually disrupted his class with signs that said like rape culture is real. And he was really startled, and but he was gracious. He like gave them the mic and asked what they had to say. But I actually reached out and apologized to him for that in my later adulthood, because I just think he was correct. There isn't a rape culture. That's such an extreme thing to say. But yeah, so I'm trying to think of other things that we did in college.
So you were an activist in college, and you said you were part of now the people that didn't like white people, were they mostly the white people, the elite white people that were rich enough to go to college, or were the black people saying that as well?
The black people I met at college were Christians. This was a friend of mine who was, she called herself mestiza. I forget what that means. I think it's like
a mixture.
Yeah, so she was like white and Mexican, I think that means. And she just hated white people. She was from California also. Starting to like note like there's a pattern here of a lot of these ideas coming from California, right? So yeah, but then she dated a white guy. So it was all like, her revealed preferences were that she liked white people. And all her friends were white, but they had the same like language of saying that they hated white people as well. And white supremacy is such a problem. So there was always like this hypocrisy there. And, there was also a lot of grooming that went on. Like these queer friends that I had would always try to like convince me I wasn't a straight woman. They'd be like, well, that's just a heteronormative concept, and you've been probably like programmed to think that you're straight. And I'd like consider it, but it'd be like, I wouldn't fully reject it, but they were definitely trying to like convert people is the way I see it. Like they were trying to like bring in more people to be queer and get them to like try to have young people question their sexuality. Was a big part of their agenda. So it was very toxic. They were very mean, weren't good friends. Like everyone was always angry. There was this spirit of anger and resentment. Humility was never mentioned. If you didn't have the right up-to-date language about like gender or whatever new construct we had, they would be very mad at you. And how could you not know that? Like, we don't say this anymore. We say this because it's more inclusive. So it was just also impossible to keep up with. And I think something that started to like chip in mine and some of my closer friends' armor was that when we would go to these meetings of people who shared our ideology, they would get really heated and really angry, and people would be very hostile and be yelling at each other on the basis of like their identity. Like things they couldn't help, like, well, you're a white man, so you're saying this, and like my voice is more marginalized than yours. And it was just this like oppression Olympics. Yeah, so I didn't see it at the time, but that was college. That was college for me.
And were pronoun rituals in the scene at that point, or had that not hit?
Not as big. It wasn't as big. But yeah, I do remember my friends saying like, I'm a they, he. But that I watched explode. I feel bad because I feel like I sort of ushered this stuff in. Like when I was at college, there were a lot of conservative kids and they just thought we were loony. And definitely there was like a conflict there. But I was a part of a kind of small group. Like my activism and my radicalness was pretty fringe for that campus, but now I think it's a lot bigger. And I went back to my alma mater on the 4th of July, and there were no American flags. There were gay flags all over the center of town. So
do you mind mentioning what your alma mater is, or is that?
Yeah, Penn State University.
Oh, Penn State. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a shame. So I don't know I wish I had better things to say about it. I wonder if, you can find more balanced professors there now, but I somehow doubt it. I just think universities attract really progressive people. And then I had this tweet that went really viral once when I said the irony of people paying therapists to work on the ideas that they paid money to get in universities. Like, you pay all this money to get all these bad ideas, and then I had to go to a lot of therapy afterwards because I was like, I'm sick and I don't know why. And it's like, well, it's the way you're thinking, like, and your beliefs are making you sick. So that was kind of the next part of my story. After I got out of college, I was just very unwell. And I think a lot of people struggle to adjust to the adult world of working. But for me, I kind of dropped some of my progressive economic ideas. My friends were getting into libertarianism because of Ron Paul. And so I started to just, like I said, I was wanted to do what my friends were doing. So I was like, okay, it's not cool to be like a fiscal liberal. So we all believe in free markets now. And okay, but I want to hang on to my like social liberalism. So I was like a left libertarian and went to Washington, D.C. and worked in the libertarian nonprofit world. But that was a lot of anarchists and people who didn't believe in authority and didn't want to be told what to do. And there was this kind of like childish, juvenile ethos to it all where we didn't trust anyone except ourselves. And people had a lot of drug problems and drinking problems. And there was a lot of experimentation with different types of relationships. Like people my age were very interested in polyamory. There was a lot of sleeping around. So and I was miserable around in this type of social scene. And I started to scare myself because I was having like suicidal ideation. And I was like, that was an alarm. It was really frightening me. So I started to seek out therapy. And that was a big turning point for me. I didn't like totally drop. It was a long journey from then to get well. But, I just think people point this out all the time. There's absolutely a link between mental illness and then this set of ideas. It's like you will be symptomatic. You will not be happy or at peace in your soul. And your body will start to tell you that you're running. It's like your body's hardware and you're running bad software, or like you have a virus. And
there's a man who was on the show. His name was Josh Slocum. He has the Disaffected podcast, and he just talks overwhelmingly that the people that are seduced by the ideology and look at the world through this lens of the oppressor oppressed victim, they are off the charts in terms of cluster B personality disorders, whether it's histrionic or narcissistic personality. It's just like it really amplifies and sends people off the charts in terms of their mental health. And just anecdotally, people that I've known, they're all on antidepressants and anger and filled with resentment.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's completely connected. And, I think I remember one thing I started to go to therapy and I found this like Christian therapist, and I don't think she was very open with me about the fact that she was a Christian. I kind of learned it later, but she was the only person that kind of like looked at me and knew what to do with me. I went to all these therapists and they were just like this. I think they were used to like young women coming to them and being like, I'm fighting with my boyfriend, but I was like, I want to kill myself. And they didn't, they were really like overwhelmed by my existential crisis. But this therapist I found wasn't, and she seemed to like understand, and she helped me. And one of the things I would chant to get my brain into a better place was it's complex, it's complex, it's complex. Because like you said, I was looking at the world in a black and white lens of just oppressor, oppressed. This very like flat, two-dimensional way of looking at things and voiding out all the complexity of the world. And that helped me a lot. I saw a lot of like more results. Like I got a lot better after I started to be like, it's complicated. Life is complicated. It's not as simple as you think it is. I used to walk into a supermarket and be full of resentment because all I saw was like capitalism. Like I'd be like, eh. And I had no sense of like flipping things that are negative into a positive. I just didn't know how to do that. But then I started to be like, okay, well, look at all the choices people have and the food that's available. And I started to learn about like communist Russia, and that helped a lot. And I saw a video of the supermarket and where there was nothing on the shelves and all the meat was rotten. And that started to help me kind of overcome my hatred of like the West and like capitalism. Yeah.
You talk about the irony of an institution like Penn State University or all of these universities that have been subverted, and the ideology is rampant all throughout. It's ironic because they're the ones that are saying, oh, America sucks and capitalism sucks. And, that's what gave the economics to build those institutions, to hire those professors, to tenure them, to give them, to put billions into endowments. It was capitalism that funded those institutions to set it up. And then oftentimes these kids that are going to these schools that are saying, oh, tear down the patriarchy and we want to destroy America, not only the country, but it's like their parents who sacrificed to pay them because they're so privileged. And now they're just filled with resentment toward every aspect of institutionalism, and they're producing nothing, but they're receiving and doing it through the benefit of capitalism, the United States, as well as, or the economics of the West, as well as family sacrifices that have built the wealth for them to even have the privilege to go there, or even the systems of getting a student loan that was built because there's confidence that those loans will be repaid back. And so I just think the hypocrisy of some of this stuff, as well as the irony, is quite telling.
Yeah, it's a fundamental lack of gratitude. Like I had no gratitude for where I was from or the sacrifices people made for me. It's just a very selfish and angry and dark outlook. And I'm not going to deny that there aren't like negative externalities to capitalism. It's not a perfect thing, So like maybe we can talk about some of those grievances, but just the lack of creative thinking also with that mindset, like it's just like, well, communism sounds better. It's like, yeah, on paper, but have you looked at societies that actually tried communism and like what were their outcomes? They're not good, and lots of people died. Yeah. But there's no. Also, I think Americans that are my age don't get an honest education on world history, so you're not told about communism in other countries. It's because all your professors are communists. So it took me leaving college and getting more real world experience to hear ideas, like well thought out ideas about like what conservatives thought about things, because I just feel like young people are totally insulated from those ideas. I don't know. I genuinely really didn't encounter a lot of them. No one was really talking to me.
Well, and free speech and open dialogue and the Socratic method and liberalism isn't even allowed. You're silenced. Shut up. Your speech is hate speech, and it's become intolerable. It's the furthest thing from liberals. I mean, they brag that they're liberals, but they're not. They're illiberal, totalitarian that control everything in terms of what you think, what you speak, how you feel, and the compliance. You earlier in the show you said that you were frustrated with the ever-changing changes of what was culturally acceptable and what your speech was. So there's no freedom. It's total control. you also got sucked into feminism, an unhealthy form of feminism. So not that, we're going to fight for equality in terms of having women have the same opportunities and given the same opportunities for education or vocation. But you had a lens of feminism that even fueled your resentment more. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about how you got sucked into that and what your worldview was during those years.
Yeah, absolutely. So feminism is a complicated topic for me because I think it wasn't entirely wrong of me to be sort of disappointed or distrusting of the young men around me because they weren't really acting respectably. So I think my response was like, well, I'm just gonna like not need men. But then the problem is that it turned into this like toxicity of me like hating them and buying into narratives about how men like rule the world and the patriarchy is keeping you down. It's like that's too far. And modern feminism, I think there were genuine waves of feminism that had some good points, like women who had abusive husbands needed other options. That was always historically a problem, and feminists of the past were working on that problem. That's okay. But modern feminism is this really nasty thing that says that it's empowering to just like be naked online or have as many sexual partners as you want. They have this like it's very crass, and I think it's completely wrong because it doesn't treat the female person as sacred and something to be protected and valued. It's just really dehumanizing, but they call it empowerment. It's a total perversion where, sleeping with a lot of people is supposed to be good for you, but really women who do that are very miserable and symptomatic. It doesn't, because we're not built for that. Not to be like too into like evolution, but we really didn't evolve that way. Like, families are made with a man and a woman and that in a monogamous context. So it's actually very unnatural to be sleeping around, and feminism calls this empowerment for young women. And then young women are very miserable and hurt all the time because women can't untangle their emotions from sex, not in the way that men can. I'm not even convinced men can totally do that.
Right.
But so it's really hurting them. And you can see it online all the time. Like women are convinced that it's empowering if they're half naked online and that they don't see a problem with it. And also I think modern feminism, certain schools of feminism have this angle that where they're adjacent to like the queer theory stuff. So they purport that anyone can identify as a woman. They have no definition of womanhood at all. If you just say you're a woman, you are. So they're the ones saying, trans women are women, which is such a ridiculous statement, because if that were true, you would just say women are women and we would know what you are talking about. But the fact that you have to qualify it means that these things are different.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that is a really toxic and bad part of modern feminism as well. And like I said, I had a good father and kind of like an inner Catholicism. So I wasn't like too involved with this. I had like boyfriends and dated normally, but like this was always like around me and something I would observe. And I saw a lot of young women caught up in it, and I would think it was fine until I noticed how hurt they were getting. Modern feminism is also very pro-abortion because for their sleeping around is okay narrative, they're going to need abortion because accidents are going to happen. A couple of my friends had abortions at a young age, and it just ruined them spiritually and psychologically. And that was something that woke me up as well. Like they would maybe have a couple of drinks and suddenly just melt down about like an abortion they had had. And we're all just supposed to pretend that abortion is healthcare and it's healthy for women. And nobody talks about the spiritual and psychological problems that come that after a woman has had an abortion. And I did find data that said like the increase in suicidal ideation is like 90%. Like the limited statistics that are out there about it are devastating. That was another part. I used to be very pro-choice and liked Planned Parenthood, and until I started to meet women that had gone through this, and it clearly had hurt them very badly. And the left just, you're not allowed to talk about that. You're not allowed to say that it isn't just something to celebrate. So
it sounds like a pretty miserable time in your life. You had completely rejected God. You were probably to a certain level estranged from your family in terms of at least ideology. You were in this friend group that were constantly angry and fighting and controlling your speech. You look at the world through the lens of victimization. You drifted into suicidal ideations. I mean, it sounds like joy was gone. Vision and faith for your future was gone. And it sounds like you're pretty miserable. So you go from Washington, D.C., and then you decide, oh, your sister, I guess, was living in San Francisco, and you took a job out there. You moved out to San Francisco, and then why don't you tell us a little bit about that time out there in San Francisco, what that was like as you went into live and reside in a postmodern hellscape?
yeah, so I went from working with libertarians in DC, and that's where I had that bad suicidal ideation crisis that I talked about. And I started to come out of that and get into like Buddhism and Taoism and kind of like New Age stuff. And it worked a little to make me better. I'm obviously hesitant to say that, but it did get me to more of a baseline. So my sister's living in San Francisco, and I would visit her there, and I thought that was more of the place for me because I'm an artist and I was getting into this like psychedelics and like New Age stuff. So I moved out there and almost immediately got a job at a psychedelic research nonprofit. I didn't even really know much about that kind of research. I just knew that this was a part of like the New Age and the festival community that I was in. And that the things I saw there are really what pushed me to Christ. It didn't take very long, but yeah, San Francisco had a lot of problems. So I think when I moved there, I had the experience in DC of conservatives having been nice to me. So I was like a little more guarded with some of the stuff that was going on there, but culturally it was just a complete mess. So people were very into drugs. Drugs were basically people's religion. And they even had like liturgical calendars around this stuff. Like the guy who invented acid was like considered a saint, and they had like a day for him called Bicycle Day, and that was on their calendar. 420 was celebrated for the sacrament of weed. The people who had like discovered these like psychedelic chemicals that everybody was using were also painted in like iconography. Like you can look up like some of these things I have that behind me, these icons. People would do that kind of style of iconography for the people who had discovered LSD and DMT and all of these things. Or like, yeah, they had, I just started to see that there was like a religion around the New Age that was like a perversion of Christianity. But there's so many angles I could talk about the problems in San Francisco. That was kind of what I was a part of professionally. There was also the polyamory problems there as well. Like I'm assuming this is just in every major city right now, but
tell us more about the polyamory. That seems to be pretty prevalent and increasing amongst the young woke mindset.
Yeah, I think it was even worse in San Francisco than it was in DC. So polyamory is this idea that you can have multiple romantic and sexual partners at a time, and that jealousy is just like an ancient emotion that you need to learn to overcome. And it's your fault if you are upset that your partner is sleeping with somebody else, and you just need to go to therapy for that. So, in like San Francisco and in like the kind of like Burning Man communities, this is a really big, and then tech communities, this is a really popular idea. And I was never about it. It felt really disturbing to me, obviously. But I know that a lot of my friends were caught up in it, and I particularly saw how it hurt women, because I think women need women need to feel like their heart is protected and their emotions are protected. And to just pretend that, like, you know, you have a boyfriend and he is dating and sleeping with someone else, and that isn't like a betrayal and painful to a woman, is just delusional. So, you know, all these women I would meet were kind of like pretending that they didn't care that their boyfriends had other girlfriends. And, you know, at one point, one of my friends would sleep over her boyfriend's house, and like the night before, his other girlfriend had been in that bed. And it was just so tragic and unholy. And I remember another girlfriend telling me, oh, we were at a party the other night and I lost track of my boyfriend. And, you know, the next day somebody told me that he had spent the night with another girl. And I was just angry for a second. And then I got over it. I didn't care. And I just didn't believe her for a second. I was like, this is eating you up inside. You absolutely care about this, which is why you're talking about it. So there's just this like self-deception that goes on, where people pretend they're very evolved and enlightened and they can handle this. And everything is a reaction to what they consider like normal and mainstream. So if what's normal is to be like monogamous, and then, well, you have to show that you're more enlightened than that and can handle this more enlightened form of relating with people. But what they don't know is that it's actually an old idea that doesn't work and is proven to not work and causes a lot of pain and suffering. And that is why that is why most people choose to be monogamous, because like, run the experiment, see how it goes for you. It doesn't go well. And it's really immoral. So yeah, I mostly saw how it affected my girlfriends, and it was really bad.
And I'm sure if you spoke profoundly with their boyfriends, there'd be similar senses of jealousy and betrayal and just you give yourself to a woman and then she doesn't really care. She wants another man instead, or you have to share her. And, I'm sure it's both ways, undoubtedly, from a male perspective.
Because what it does is it just removes the meaning of your relationship. It's like, well, then our relationship is meaningless. If we have no boundaries and nothing that's special between us, that's just for us, then our relationship doesn't mean anything.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So people are just completely void of meaning. And yeah, it's really painful for people. I knew men that were also hurt by this as well. And they would there was a lot of like freedom for me, but like not for thee too. Like, people would want to do it themselves, but then if their boyfriend or girlfriend did it, then they were hurt. And I was just like, no one was like connecting the dots that this was a really bad practice.
Well, Amy, I want to thank you for being so vulnerable to open up with our audience your pathway, and you went through some pretty dark spaces, and I know that takes courage to talk about that. But you know what? The main reason why I want you in the show is I want you to tell about what happened in your life and where you at now, and leaving all that behind, because that's all part of your history. Who are you today, and what happened, and how did you get so incredibly transformed?
Yeah. So yeah, we're kind of at the part of the story where I started to be like, none of this is the right path. So what happened was, I think Jordan Peterson had a moment. He was getting really popular on YouTube, and my friend, who was a Christian, came to visit me in San Francisco and kept talking about him. And I was really annoyed with her. And I was like, who is this guy that she keeps talking about? I tried to watch one of his videos and it just didn't connect with me. I brought it up to my dance teacher, who was probably the only person I met in San Francisco that actually like genuinely thought for herself and wasn't involved in like a lot of toxic ideologies. And she said, oh, Jordan Peterson's wonderful. Here, let's watch. And she made it like very like, I guess, kind of like safe for me to watch his video, because I had this sense that he was like an undesirable, and I wasn't like allowed to watch his video. And it was a video called Jordan Peterson, His Finest Moment. You can look it up. It's great. And he talks about how Western civilization it's no mistake that it's built on a man being unfairly nailed to a cross and persecuted. And he was kind of making this connection between like the social justice warriors always being concerned about like oppression, and how Christianity actually contains that message in it. He's like, yes, we're all oppressed, Like, what do you do with that? You can try to parse it out and play, you know, Olympics of who's most oppressed, but ultimately every human being has struggles. And this is what religious people have always been trying to tell you, is that life has suffering in it. So what do you do with that? And he said, you try to be strong. You carry your cross, metaphorically, and try to be helpful to other people, even though, yeah, you have problems, and she has problems, and he has problems, and everybody has things that they're struggling with. And I was just blown away. I'd never heard anybody talk about Christianity that way. And I'd never understood that that's what people had been trying to teach me. So I dropped all my all my leftist friends, and I just started binge watching his videos about the Bible and Christianity. And I'd like excitedly tell my sister about it. And I would just paint at night and just listen to his lectures. And it totally changed me. I actually at one point felt a little sick. Like, I remember feeling kind of like, oh my goodness, I've been ingesting poison for years, and like physically felt ill while all of these ideas were being like exercised out of me. It really did feel like taking medicine. So, and like, there's like a purge, like, oh, I need to get all this bad stuff out of me, all these demons. And, that things got strange. Like, I think I experienced, I don't want to get too like woo woo, but I did experience some demonic attacks while I was exploring Christianity. I think like some forces really wanted me to stay where I was. And, I had bad episodes of sleep paralysis, and saying the name of Jesus just stopped the attacks. And that just furthered my belief and my interest in Jesus and Christianity. I would say there was like an awkward puberty where I was sort of between worlds, where I was like wanting to hang on to some of the stuff I liked from the New Age, and but also really interested in Jesus. And I was struggling with like, can I take and what can I leave? But ultimately, like, the more I pressed into Christianity, the more I was seeing all this dysfunction in society, and I was like, oh, the Bible talks about this. You know, there's nothing new under the sun. And all these things have happened already. And history is like alive, and it's not like some dead thing in the past. It's like these problems are like always happening. There's always this spiritual battle happening on this realm. And this gives me a pathway out of it. So, and every time, everyone had said that Christians were like judgmental and bigots and white supremacists. And the more I pressed into it, Christians were so nice to me. They were patient with me. They were supportive. They would say they loved me. And like, I felt like they actually meant it in a way that the progressives didn't. And the more I explored it, the more it was just like very compassionate, and I was meeting better people. So much of my anxiety was gone, and my depression. So yeah, it was just like, oh, everything was a lie. This whole time I've been like, that's the one thing I can't be, is like a Christian. And the whole time, like, that was the thing that was right, and that was actually going to give me like the internal peace and the mental stability that I so desperately needed. So yeah, and then I had a journey from.
I just want to say that just fascinating. Been doing this show for about 6 months now, and you are at least the 10th guest that was really steeped in the ideology and really at a bad place. And God used Jordan Peterson to speak to them. It wasn't like a pastor or even reading the Bible on their own or meeting somebody else, or just absorbing his videos. And it's kind of, I know he's controversial, and there's, I think anybody who's effective is controversial. So I just find that fascinating that once again, Jordan Peterson, who's a controversial figure, was used to really help somebody that was in desperate need.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I might have like kind of outgrown a lot of his content now.
Sure.
I'm Orthodox, but I owe him a lot, and a lot of people do. And he's
I became a Christian. I became a Christian through Seventh Day Adventism, and I just was a younger man, and I absorbed all that. And now I can look back at that and say, I don't necessarily agree with all those things, and but I'm not slamming the Seventh Day Adventist Church like some people would, because it was this point in time that God used in my life to get me to think about other things than what I was thinking about. So I'm kind of just grateful for that period of my life, even though I wouldn't go to a Seventh Day Adventist church for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, and I think that's actually the appropriate way to look at these things. And what was placed in front of us was there intentionally to help
Yeah.
us throughout our journey. And so I don't even like hate progressives or new agers at all, like, because I was them, like, and I love them anyway, and I understand where they are. And same with Jordan Peterson. I don't hate him. I'm not gonna, publicly dunk on him or anything. He helped me a lot. So I think he should be like, I don't know, he seems like saintly to me. And like this man, he has walked so many people to the door of church. And even though maybe he doesn't enter it himself sometimes, but that's really noble. So yeah.
So then what continued to happen as you were finding peace and building a relationship with Jesus to where you're at today? What, because some of the things you're doing now are absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I talked to you about this on our phone call before this podcast, but the thing is that when you do start to follow Christ, you do lose a lot of things, and a lot of your life does kind of fall apart. But you're okay with that because there's other things meeting you. So I lost a lot of friends. I had to leave San Francisco because I just didn't trust the people around me anymore. And COVID was a part of that also. I could feel something weird coming and didn't want to be around those people. But yeah, so I became, started to visit churches, and I thought, I got humbled, and I was like, maybe I was wrong about Catholicism. So I started of how I was raised. So I started to go back to Roman Catholic churches, and just none of them were really like quite hitting for me. I was like, this doesn't really feel like mystical and spiritual in the way that like I think I'm experiencing Christianity. So I also made a couple stops at some like non-denominational churches, and that just didn't resonate with me at all because I'm a visual artist, and I was like, where's the stained glass and the paintings? So that's just like probably my inner like Italianness. But so yeah, and I'm like learning about these different denominations, kind of like against my will. I kind of just wanted to be a Christian and like not and like find a church and not worry too much about Catholic, Protestant, Baptist, Methodist, like all of these things. But then I kept being told that I would really like Orthodoxy by different people. Like different people, this is coming out of their mouths. You would like really like Orthodoxy. And I would just kind of say I'd never heard of that before, and I wasn't curious about it. And then somebody asked me to paint an Orthodox saint for them. And at that point, it was like right in front of me. And I was like, okay, what is this Christian religion? And that got me to pay attention to it. And then my friends started to take me to a couple of Orthodox churches. And the first one I went to, it was an older church with kind of a mean priest. So he kind of yelled at us for like cooing at a baby, even though like no one was there. And I was like, I'm never becoming Orthodox, but this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. This is the most beautiful church I've ever seen. And then, I gave it another shot, went to another Orthodox church, and then I just like fell like a ton of bricks. I was like, this is awesome. Like the priest was really engaging. He came up to me and was talking to me about the paintings, and I was like, how did he know I'd be like so interested in the paintings here and the symbolism in them? And I just like felt this kind of like inner fire of like, you need to be in this church. Can't fully explain it, and then the more I would read ancient faith booklets about Orthodoxy, and it had all the elements I was looking for. I liked the New Age because it was mystical, but it wasn't truthful. So it had mysticism, but it lacked Jesus and the truth of Christ. This was mystical and it had Jesus. So it was just like the perfect harmony. It was just what I was looking for all those years. So yeah, I converted to Orthodoxy in March 2021, and I've been Orthodox ever since. So.
I find that fascinating because most Orthodox churches, there's a very cultural aspect to them, the Romanian or Ukrainian or Russian and Greek. And in America, a lot of them stayed tied to their language and in the homeland, and it's ethnic usually. But yet there's something extremely spiritual that goes on. And the man who was my former pastor, one of my closest friends in the world, he converted to Orthodoxy, and he's a Romanian Orthodox priest and has his church in Phoenix, and he just said he felt like he found home. And I think it is like the Wall Street Journal just did an article about the explosion in Orthodoxy, the growth in America, and then all through America, there's a lot of growth going in Orthodoxy, more so than in the mainline Christian denominations or in evangelicalism. There's this drawing of people to Orthodoxy, and I think there's the reason. I mean, I was thinking about this is there is this spiritual mysticism about it that's faith-based and Christian, but it's in this postmodern world where nothing matters and everything's torn apart and everything's deconstructed, whether it's gender or faith or relationships and roles of parenting. It's one thing that's stable, and the divine liturgy has been around since before Muhammad was born for Islam. I mean, it's the same liturgy globally that happens every Sunday with the highlight of the blood and the body and the blood of Christ, and the mysticism associated with that, and the experiential aspect of the incense and the chanting and the singing and the participatory nature, and the mysticism of it, and the strength of the stability, I think, is an allure to people, especially in your generation, that are looking for stability and sick of living purposelessness and meaninglessness, and just want to connect with the divine. And so, have you ever heard of a guy named Jonathan Pageau?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's been the most profound spiritual influence on Jordan Peterson's life, and he's an Orthodox iconographer, and he's solid. I love that guy. And how do you say iconographer?
Iconographer. Yep.
Now you've done a lot of paintings, and I'm going to pull up on your website some of the work that you've done, and so I think there's some similarities to his worldview and yours, obviously. Anna, can you pull this up? This is on your website, Amy the Artist, and you can enlarge those, Diana. Yeah, so maybe you can talk about some of these and why these mean so much to you and what your inspiration is.
Yeah, so I've always been a painter, and it was exciting to me to find that Orthodoxy had this painting practice to it. They call it writing because
why don't you scroll through some of them while she's speaking?
Yeah, because this is actually a piece that I did before I was Orthodox, but some of these other ones are a little more in the traditional style. But I like Catholic art and Orthodox art. For Orthodoxy, the idea is that the painting is sacred, and when you gaze into the eyes of the saint depicted, it's almost like a window to them, and you're interfacing with them in a way. We don't worship. There's this misconception that we worship the icon. That's not true. It's more like how do I say it? It's more like just if you have a photo of a loved one and you use it to gaze upon it to feel connected to them and to remind yourself of how much you love them. It's just like that. So yeah, I love painting these for people. A lot of people reach out to me and ask me to paint a certain saint. Like all of these actually were people's requests. And I learn about the saint while I'm painting them, and it feels like intimate, like I'm getting to know them. And I think it's, it's been a really good practice for me. And I always felt that painting and creating was a spiritual practice. It's a way to kind of commune with God, and it helps your soul. So Orthodoxy having that practice as a part of it was really important to me as an artist. So yeah, and I'm not like it's in America. It's very hard to find like a mentor for this. So I know that like a lot of what I'm doing is like not entirely traditional. I'm just like doing my bbest with the knowledge I have. And,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, so I try to just be humble about it, because I know that there's.
I have a theory, and I want to test it on you. When you look at the West has really sucked into the critical social justice on all these levels, or wokeism is referred to. However, in the East, like I'm not talking about Asia, I'm talking about Eastern Europe and Russia, and then I'm also talking about in Latin America. Uh, they do not have the propensity to fall for this godless ideology like we do in the West, and the new secular religion is wokeism that you were a convert to at one point. And I think, and you correct me where I'm wrong, I think there's something about the beatification of Mary as the mother of God, where there's a reverence for her that plays out in conservative Catholicism as well as in Orthodoxy, whereby uh, the level of the femininity of Mary and the and the beatification of her seeps into the culture in such a way where people idolize their own mothers and femininity and women in a way that's healthy and balanced. And the idea of tearing down the patriarchy and tearing down the structure of family does not resonate as much in the psyche of Eastern Orthodox or conservative Catholicism, as much so as if you study church history, there was a great schism of 1054 where Orthodoxy and Christian and Catholicism were unified, and then they separated, and then through the Protestant Reformation, rejecting the Pope. Now there's 10,000 churches with their own Pope, but yet they've rejected the sainthood of Mary or the beatification of her. And I think consequentially, as a result, there's less respect for the patriarchy and motherhood itself, the divine order of things with mom and dad, and it's more susceptible as it's been in the West. Now that's pretty well, I said a lot of words there, but I was wondering if you think there's something to what I'm saying in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like I said, my story has a lot of like me struggling with like the place of women and how to treat women, and this was always like a concern for me. So in the Orthodox Church, I feel like women are looked at properly because we have such a reverence for Mary. Again, we don't worship her, but she's there as someone that we can speak with, who will intervene on our behalf and mother us. So she has concern for us. She weeps for our struggles. So I think it's like an antidote to everything that they're upset about. It's like, if you're upset about like treatment of women and you think it's men's fault, like why don't you look to these religions that really revere a female figure, and they are concerned with your protection and have an understanding of your vulnerabilities and want to help you cover for them. So yeah, I think it's I was unable to connect with any religion that didn't in my belief have Mary in the proper place, because I think a lot of Protestant religions are like, it's just Jesus, just Jesus, just Jesus. Mary was just like a normal person. It's like, she really wasn't though. So yeah, I think that and in the Orthodox Church, men have a very healthy way of relating to women. The priests are married often, not all of them, but a lot of them are married. And in the Catholic Church, the priests aren't. And I just felt a little like, I don't know what the word is for it. I just liked that the priests were married in Orthodoxy, and some of them had families, because I felt then they kind of understood, the needs of women and children. And I know there's an argument to be made for like, then they can't devote their whole selves to their church, but I personally don't think it's a problem. So
It's interesting that you go from a worldview of, and the voices around you to say, tear down the patriarchy, destroy the patriarchy, smash the patriarchy, to one that's intentionally established on the patriarchy and is very patriarchal from the bishops on down, and historically the church fathers.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I think I had like the wrong patriarchy in some ways is one of these words that has been thrown around so much that it's just like losing its meaning, which is sad, because when I say patriarchy, I have one idea, but if I say that to a leftist, they have a totally different conception of what that means. So to me, it means like, a hierarchy of benevolent men, and men keeping other men in check for their like sins and bad behavior. that then can like cover and protect women and children. That's what I think patriarchy really means. It's like good fathers, like a system or network of good fathers. But if you think it means like the bad aspects of a man, then yeah, you're going to be against patriarchy. If you think it means like abuse and abandonment and all these like bad things, but I don't think that's what it means in the purest sense of the word.
And the church would never condone that either. The church.
No, ever. That's unacceptable. So yeah, if like young women are looking to be like taken care of or cared for and have their hearts protected, then the church is where they want to be going. Because people are looking out for your well-being there and they don't want you to be exploited. But sadly, I don't think a lot of young left women know they're being exploited. So
Have you been baptized yet?
Yeah, so I was baptized when I was an infant, and someone told me that might have protected me from a lot of the like demons I was around in my early 20s. But then when I became Orthodox, I was chrismated and not rebaptized. There's some debate about that, about rebaptism, because it's, one baptism for the
Well, they would, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think if because of the relationship and the historical links between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, they would recognize a Catholic baptism and, as you said, be chrismated into the Orthodox Church, whereas I think if a Protestant church member would convert to Orthodoxy, they would have to be they wouldn't necessarily recognize the baptism. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. Because I think it depends on if the baptism is done in the name of the Trinity, and that's the difference there. And I think there's an agreement between the Catholic and the Orthodox Church that they recognize each other's baptisms as a sacrament. So,
yeah, so I think there's a lot of obviously historical links there, and so my encouragement, even though I'm not Orthodox, I have not been baptized into the church. I do go to the church, and I feel very comfortable, and I ask the Father to bless me. I'm just not at that point in my own faith process. But I would encourage anybody who's been seduced by the critical social justice mindset to study the claims of the Orthodox Church and historical Catholicism as well, because as what you're saying, Amy, you found a lot of freedom and joy and deliverance, and the demons that once plagued you and filled your mind and led you to such a horrific depression have gone, and you've been totally transformed in your worldview. And so I was wondering, and I would like to encourage anybody who's listening, maybe buy some of Amy's work online. That'd be a great way to support her and what she's doing. And so I'd like, you to speak to the heart of, to close up here, any last things you want to say. But then also the only purpose that I'm doing this show is to amplify voices of people that were in the ideology, that were stuck in the cult, but then were delivered. And so I want you to just speak to somebody who's considering being sucked into the brainwashing of what's going on in the secular religion, or those that are stuck in it. Not that you can win an argument, but maybe give them some hope and give them some direction, or families that have been decimated by losing loved ones to the secular ideology. So maybe you can give the last word about like what you're doing, any last charge or exhortation to people that might be struggling.
Yeah, I would just say that like conservatives and Christians do not hate you. It's against our religion to hate you. Actually, we're called to love everyone, no matter what. So if you've been told that conservatives are hateful or Christians are hateful, they're really not. And if they are acting that way, they need to repent for that, and that they're not actually living out their values, their stated values. So I would just say that, it's not what you've been told, and that you might actually find a lot of people who really love you and care about you, even if they don't agree with you. And there's a place for not agreeing with someone politically or ideologically, but still caring about their dignity and their well-being. And I think that's kind of what I didn't know. I didn't know that people on the other side of the aisle were still people with good hearts. So I would just encourage you to explore that. You might be surprised.
And what would you say to the person? Because I think ultimately it's not even a war on each other. even though it's manifest that way, and that's what we see. It's kind of like a religion to keep us away from God. And as you were brainwashed to think that Christianity is oppressive and it's an oppressive patriarchal religion, what would you say to those that up until this point just want nothing to do with Christianity because it's oppressive, it's a religion of hate? Uh, what could you push back, and what could you say? Besides, the Christians aren't what they might believe. What about God Himself?
I would say that God Himself gives us a lot of free will. It's mostly free will that He gives us, with then just like a couple of like, don't do this, don't steal, don't kill, don't cheat. But other than that, you have a lot of free will, because God is not a tyrant. A tyrant does not give you free will. A tyrant tells you what to do. But God is pure love, and therefore not tyrannical. You can come to God of your own free will. He wants that for you. And you have a lot of freedom and choice in your actions, and God still loves you. Yeah, you are called to do some rituals and practices to make sure you're taking care of your soul, but there are things that ultimately benefit you. And yeah, I would say like, a loving parent isn't a tyrant, and God is a loving father. So his ethos, if you will, is not one of tyranny and oppression. It's one of freedom and love and joy and care for your well-being and your soul.
Wonderful. And how can people get a hold of you? We'll have you in the notes and everything. But is there a particular way that people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, my website is amy-the-artist.com, and I have a contact form on there. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's also Amy the Artist. Couple of underscores. We can put it in the description. But and then I also have a Facebook page and a Twitter page. I'm on all the social media except TikTok. So.
And that's all Amy the Artist, because I looked under you as your name and I couldn't find you on Twitter. But is it Amy the Artist?
It's at Amy the Artist. Yeah.
Okay,
and
perfect.
I just took my last name off some things, but and then I also do, like, I have an identical twin, and we do a podcast where we talk about cultural issues, women's issues, orthodoxy, the topic of the day, movies, and that's called The Mystic Sisters, and it's on YouTube.
Oh, wonderful. Well, God bless you, my sister. Thank you for the sacrifice of your time and the vulnerability you showed today. And thank you for coming on the show. And may be blessed, and may be filled with peace and joy as you go forward to discover the will of God for your life, and that your life has a great impact on many, many people. Thank you again.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you. I appreciate it.
Okay.